Oh, landmines and jellyfish. Welcome back to Knives, I guess. And what's that? You want a sharding contest? For a shot at the title? I'm going to tell you right now, you aim for the king, you best not miss. But for the last week, I've been carrying the Ozark Trail Stormpooper Axis Lock. So I decided on Stormpooper for the name. That was the best thing I could think of, and I think it really fits the vibe. But if you haven't seen this thing before, somehow, let's take a look at what we're holding. And first things first, and most importantly, the pocket clip is tip up, which is the Lord's carry. We have got white polypropylene scales, which we got the texture on right. Nyar. We got an axis lock, and we got a thumb stud. Let's flick the stud. And we got a 3.25 inch, according to the packaging, blade in steel? I think it's 3CR13. One of the other listings on Amazon listed their gift set as 3CR13, so that's what I am going with. But, yeah, if you haven't seen this or you don't know what's going on here by some strange miracle, now every year around the holidays, Walmart releases an Ozark Trail Axis Lock of some sort. Last year they did 2 of them, and this is this year's. And, of course, the very first year, I don't have that one. I may or may not end up buying one. They're on eBay for, of course, the usual markup when I do see one. Those things looked incredibly cheap. I want to check one out. And, of course, last year, I believe it was, there were the 2 that I do have, and there was another gift set that I could never find that has a blue one. I would have loved to have gotten that one to do the full comparison. And, of course, last year when I looked at those are on washers. We're going to look at those and compare and contrast this with those a bit later on down the road here in a couple of days. But I predicted the next one was going to be on bearings, and here we are. You know, I'm glad I got that right, and I thought I was mistaken. When I first got this thing out of the package, the action was really stiff. It felt like it was on washers, and when I finished that video up, I opened and closed it for about 30 or 40 seconds after that, and it loosened right up and started working. And as you can tell right now, the action is looser than a woman of ill repute. I made that joke last time, but it's still valid. And, yeah, so, I mean, this thing was definitely a joy and a treat, especially for $5. And, I did have it on me all week long. So, one of the first things to note, and I'm not sure how or when it happened, but I'm on my 3rd take of this thing, and on the 2nd take, I flipped it over and I realized the screw fell out somewhere. There is focus. There is a missing screw. I don't know where it fell out. It doesn't have any effect at all on anything, but yeah, a screw fell all the way out. I'm going to go through my knife parts from broken knives and see if there's an extra screw that I can pop in there just to feel a little bit better about that. But, much like the bug out, you've got a partial steel liner that goes to right here, which had no effect whatsoever on performance. You can flex this thing. Let's see. Like, you can flex it, but it's really not that bad. The way it's molded, there's a grid in here, which provides some rigidity and reduces weight, which is what you're supposed to do with something like this. If that was solid plastic, it probably would flex a whole lot more. But, no, it's not that big of a deal. I've seen a lot of complaints about the pocket clip. And this one is sitting a little bit high, which, you know, it's not the end of the world. That may have been mishandled a little bit while it was still on the shelf. The one that I gave a coworker, that one did not have that problem. It's just this one, according to everything that I felt on the extras that I picked up just in case. So, yeah, it's not bad for $5. You know, there's a lot of hate for it, and a lot of guys are like, oh, if it wasn't for the mystery steel, I'd be happy with it. Like, no, everybody was freaked out and they were delighted with the Axis locks last year that weren't as good as this one for the same $5. If it wasn't for the weak pocket clip, again, it's no worse than the ones from last year that everybody freaked all the way out over, you know, and it's on bearings. Like, this is so much better than the last year's. Like I said, we'll do a full compare and contrast a little bit later, but, you know, the pocket clip isn't really worse than, well, it is worse. I thought this one was about the same, but this one is a legitimate pocket clip, you know, and pocket clips like this have done very well for me. The only thing is, like, if you somehow catch it on something, it will bend out of shape, but that's an easy fix. So, in my opinion, the hatred towards this thing, the guys that are complaining the most about it, it's overblown. It is overblown, you know, and like the cheap steel, okay, I will give you that. Cheap steel is a bit of a letdown for some people. But I think we are forgetting, $5 for this is exceptional. Exceptional value for the money. And if, say, Kershaw or Gerber sold this exact knife in 3CR, they'd probably be charging around 30, 35 bucks minimum. And again, it wasn't more than a couple of years ago where this would be a much more expensive knife with the exact same materials, exact same build, much more expensive. It's a hell of a time to be a knife guy. Things have come a long way. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, I will say, when this is in the pocket, getting around this thing was a bit of a pain in the ass. The edges right here on the inside of the frame, or the liners, or the scales. We'll go with scales. They're not chamfered. That is a fancy word, but they're not chamfered at all. So like, you do catch on this thing a little bit trying to get around it. Like, it's not the worst thing that I've ever felt, but it's annoying. So that was like one of the biggest detriments I think this thing had. Was in the pocket, not the most pleasant experience. Everything else about this thing went exactly as well as I expected. It did great for EDC use. I fed it some cardboard. It sliced. It was every bit as good as the dropout. And of course, it does centrifugal open. I figured that out and then learned that most of my other access locks also centrifugal open. Wow. Oh, God, I hate doing that flat under the camera. It's just such an unnatural motion. I complained about it last time. I'll complain about it every time. But, it's a very, very comparable, nearly identical grind to this one. And, yeah, I mean, it cut great. It carried great. The only other really big downside is the factory edge did leave a bit to be desired when cutting plastic off of pallets. That is one of my favorite tests to see how refined the edge is. If you've got a really good, clean, refined edge, it'll go straight through that plastic like you're cutting water. With a weak edge, it'll be all right through the middle where you got a bunch of layers, but you get down to the bottom where like there's that last single layer. If you have edge problems, it's going to hang up and snag on that hard. So the edge on this isn't the most refined that I've gotten, but again, $5 knife. Like, you got to kind of give it some grace there, because like, if I had spent more money on this, and you're looking at maybe the $30 to $35 and up range where you start to really expect clean, crisp, refined edges. And again, that is so much cheaper than it would have been a couple of years ago to expect an edge that is super refined and clean. But at that point, you start expecting the nice, clean, tight, refined edges. That's where we are now as a community, and how they're being manufactured, and the type of companies that are kind of taking over the scene. So, it's not the end of the world, but let's take a look at what we got on the edge with the copy paper, because that is the end-all be-all of sharpness testing. Like, it does still get the job done. It wasn't the best cut out of the box. I did feed it a couple of cardboard cuts, but I mean, it's still very serviceable. And I've seen kind of a range of reactions from this thing online. I got guys on my Faceballs groups that are also freaking out over this thing. Some guys have said the edge is good. Some guys have said the edge is really bad. I think I'm somewhere in the middle here. But it's, at this point, if you are the kind of person that's going to freak out over this because it's $5, you're going to want that edge, and you probably do have sharpening equipment. If you're someone that isn't into knives and just stops and scoops it up because, hey, $5 knife, and you don't know about the steel or anything else, you probably don't care. I mean, that's where it is. That's my thoughts on that. Either you're a knife guy and you got sharpening equipment to fix this, or you're not a knife guy and you just saw a cheap knife and you felt like picking one up. You're not going to care. It's going to be sharp enough for anything you're ever going to do with it. But let's take a look at the tester real quick and see where the edge sits. I'm going to guess it's probably into the 300s by now. I didn't feed it a ton of cardboard. It was just a couple of real quick cuts while I was walking to the baler with a piece, because I almost forgot to do that. But I'm going to guess 300s. 379. Okay, so yeah, that was definitely some edge wear. Because if I remember right, it was around 300. We're going to do a second test just to see. We need to see. Test it somewhere else on that on the area near the belly. see how it does. Let's tear that out. See, I learned I didn't power it off and power it back on that time. Yeah, 252. So, you know, that's where we were. Like, the belly did take a hit on the cardboard, and I did push it pretty hard through like 4 or 5 cuts, which isn't a huge deal, but I also dropped it once or twice while I was opening it, because one thing I did do was I walked around and just flipped it open and closed as hard as I could like that. Once I figured out a centrifugal flick, of course I wanted to fidget with it, but I also wanted to see whether or not I could, you know, do enough to this thing to introduce lock rock on it, and there's nothing. There's nothing. I mean, I spent hours like sitting in the truck on break, just opening and closing it, watching YouTube, walking around work, checking my aisles, just flicking it open and closed. Around the house when I wasn't sitting right next to the much better half, flicking it open and closed, and I mean flicking it hard. There's nothing. There's just the slightest hint of side-to-side blade play that was there to begin with, which could be fixed by tightening this up just a hair, but it did nothing to it. I know last year's batch, guys were complaining about the locks no, it was this one. Guys were complaining about the lock bar bending a little bit, or the stop bar. Something was bending a little bit and screwing up the opening and closing on it, but I didn't get anything. I really reefed on this thing. So, you know, overall, it's about what I expected. For $5, it's about what I expected. And of course, we are going to do Cardboard Slayer with it. It's Friday today. Tomorrow, Saturday, starting at 5 p.m., we're doing Cardboard Slayer with it to test the edge retention. But, you know, I think you get your bang for the buck. You get your bang for the buck, you know. And again, like, everybody freaked out over last year's. Everybody freaked out over that first year. I think this is better than those, but you know, like I said, we're gonna do a compare and contrast in a couple of days here, so I can show you what once was and what is now. So yeah, that's all I can think of to say about this thing. It did good. Couple of small problems, but nothing that's a deal breaker, especially for $5. But all that being said, thanks for looking at my crap. Subscribers, you guys are awesome. Y'all keep coming in. I appreciate you so much. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We got giveaways coming up. We got live streams. There's plenty of activities. Comments, I love some feedback. Of course, we're going to go back in on this thing. Everybody likes talking about it right now. And all that being said, y'all have a nice day.